everybody back. So now we have the second lecture for topological phases with Professor Manuel Fizet. He already stopped at the idea of band theory of solids. I think there is something to add, and you can proceed.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. So indeed, the aim of this lecture will be to show you that starting from the conventional band theory of solids, you can find some new topological phases of matter. So last time I stopped at this point, and I introduced the Bloch theorem. In the notes, the next part I wanted to discuss was about symmetries. So I will just, well, given that I didn't proceed as much as I thought last time, I will just discuss one part of time reversal symmetry, and I will return to this point later in a more general case. So the Bloch theorem I was telling you yesterday was for, I didn't introduce the spin degree of freedom. I want to remain in this frame where we think of electrons, but we forget completely that in principle they have a spin degree of freedom. And we may think, for instance, that time reversal symmetry is broken in the system. But let's consider, so in the sense that the spin degree of freedom won't play a role. But otherwise, I want to look at what happened if there is time reversal symmetry considering the orbital degree of freedom, so the one that is described by the Schrödinger equation that I was writing last time. So how we can think of time reversal symmetry for a particle, we would like to introduce an operator such that it won't touch the position, but it will reverse at least classically, we would like to have the velocity of particles that is reversed. So in quantum mechanical description, the momentum that will change its sign. And if we look at the Schrödinger equation, which in a time-dependent description would be like this, with the wave function. Actually, we can notice that if we take the complex value for this Schrödinger equation, so here we just take the complex value of it. But I want, so I should put the sign, but I want to reverse the time. I will get this Schrödinger equation. So I know that I want to have a Hamiltonian which is time reversal invariant, so it should be the same as h of t, sorry, with the complex conjugation. So it means that the same, I'm getting confused now. Yeah, I did two things. I took the complex conjugation and I reversed the sign of time such that I reproduced the Schrödinger equation that way. Okay, so if I have a solution of the Schrödinger equation of the time-dependent Schrödinger equation, I will find that actually I can find another solution for the time Schrödinger equation that leaves my equation of motion invariant, provided that my Hamiltonian is time reversal invariant. So the time reversal invariant of the Hamiltonian is actually to express that I'm getting completely confused, sorry. The time reversal invariance corresponds to having h which is equal to h star, which means that my time reversal operator actually corresponds to the complex conjugation. So if I want to look at what does the complex conjugation now from the point of view of my, assuming that I have the time reversal invariance in my Hamiltonian from the point of view of the block bands, it means that if I have a block band, which I was writing yesterday, like, so I just write down this my block bands in this form with the plane wave part and the part which was periodic with the period of the lattice. If I apply time reversal invariance for this wave function, I will get the complex of my wave function, and it will correspond actually just to reverse the direction of the quasi-momentum in that wave function. So that's just what time reversal invariance will do at the level of a Hamiltonian that I may consider. So I just want to have this time reversal operator, which just reverses actually momentum for a particle in free space or quasi-momentum for my block function. And now I want to that's just what I want you to keep in mind. But now I want to go back to this block wave functions that I was considering. And I want to show actually that there is more information that I was actually deriving in this part. In this part, what I was interested in was finding the block bands of a solid and classify them between insulator and metals. But actually, I was just looking at the energy of these solutions of my Schrödinger equation. What I want to show now is that actually there is more information in the wave functions than in the spectrum. And this information, which part of the information which I can find in the system will be related with the Berry phase. Yes?
I'm a bit confused about your operators. Could you maybe repeat it or give like a little dictionary which symbol is the time reversal operator?
Okay, I confused myself, I guess. So, I consider that I have this time-dependent Schrödinger equation. If I have this time-dependent Schrödinger equation, I can just say that if I have a solution, time-dependent solution, just by taking the complex conjugation and reversing the time, I will construct another equation which looks like Schrödinger equation but with this Hamiltonian. Okay? So now I want to consider Hamiltonian, which is time independent and which I want to reproduce the same equation. It will be the case if my Hamiltonian is time independent and corresponds to this to the same which does not depend on H star. Then I will get well, what I want to say is that if H equals H star, I will find okay, what I want to say is that having time reversal symmetry means that this Hamiltonian will correspond to H star. Hmm?
I think here you should mean the theta H theta equals H star minus theta. Which means you apply the time reversal symmetry operator.
H of t equals H star minus.
Yes, like this. Mm-hmm.
Where's the operator?
Okay, I'll try to do a better job. yes, I would like to have Hamiltonian which commutes with time reversal symmetry. And if the Hamiltonian commutes with time reversal symmetry, I would like to say that time reversal symmetry corresponds to taking complex conjugation. And if I have time reversal symmetry, then it means that if I have a wave function associated with momentum k, then the wave function associated with momentum minus k will also be a solution of the Schrödinger equation. So essentially, it was the idea that I can take the film in opposite. If I change the velocity of my particles, then I will not distinguish. The idea that Julius Nazarov was telling you yesterday, that if I reverse the sign of the momentum, then all the film will be traced back in the opposite direction, but it will give the same. Well, knowing that here at this level, maybe knowing that the momentum operator is like this, actually this corresponds to taking complex conjugation to get this reversal of velocity without reversing the position, taking at the same position. So essentially, yes, at this level, if my Hamiltonian is time reversal symmetric, then a solution for a given quasi-momentum will correspond to a solution with opposite quasi-momentum as well for my block bands. So this concept of, so now I want to come back with Hamiltonian that does not have necessarily time reversal symmetry. I want to see, so I don't require time reversal symmetry at this stage, but I am still considering these block bands, which could be expressed into this wave function. But I was deriving yesterday that actually, if the block wave function solves the Schrödinger equation, actually, it is equivalent to looking at an equation defined on an equation that was looking similarly to the Schrödinger equation, except now that I have to shift the momentum by this quasi-momentum, if I was considering the equation for this periodic part of the wave function. So that formulation was equivalent to the one that I was starting from on the level of the block wave function. So I have this equation, but k now is a parameter. It was the quasi-momentum that I had chosen to restrict to the Brillouin zone, but in this equation, it is a parameter. And what I want to think now is what happens to this equation when k is a parameter for which I allow this parameter to slowly vary on time. So that's okay. So this is what the definition of the block bands. Now I want to consider a slowly varying Hamiltonian, where k now depends on time. So it means now that I want to find some wave function which depends on time. Taking into account the fact that k dot is small in some sense. In a sense that I will explain later. So if k was static, I would have my series of eigenfunction. But here I want to solve a more complicated time-dependent equation, but I can still use this this basis of instantaneous eigenstates labeled by a value of k as a basis to write down my Schrödinger equation. So this I will call my instantaneous eigenbasis And I want to develop this equation in that basis. Okay, I will use these bracket symbols. So that's a valid expansion because at each time k is defined, and at each k I know I have a complete basis of states on which I can expand this wave function. And I will add that I want to have as an initial condition the fact that initially I'm starting with one of these bands where my wave function is complete. So at time t equals 0, I want to have all Cn zeros except for one of them. So using these properties of the eigenbasis and using this Schrödinger equation, I can find what is the equation that is obeyed by the Cn's. So for this, I can use this expansion on the right and on the left side, and I will find that so if I write here from the right side, I will get that epsilon n. So I just plug this series into this equation, and I collect all the terms that I have using the fact that all states form a basis. So for a given k, unk of t and umk of t for the same k are orthonormal. And doing this, collecting all the terms, I will find that my Schrödinger equation is equivalent to this equation plus an additional term which comes from the fact that there is a time dependence that enters this wave function through this parameter. So this term will generate the derivative of this instantaneous parameter. And it will also generate a collection of terms which corresponds to an extension like this. So taking the derivative of this term will generate. So here, if I plug this part into this wave function, I know that these are eigenstates, so the Hamiltonian applied on this eigenstate generates epsilon n times the energy of this state times the coefficient Cn, and that is simply this term. The time derivative of this term will generate a derivative of this coefficient which will appear on that side of the term, as well as the part which corresponds to the time derivative of this term. And the time derivative of this term will, in principle, can be extended on all the other eigenstates. And that's what comes out from this term. We have a contribution corresponding to derivative of all these eigenstates with a coefficient Cn projected on the part of the wave function we are interested to give this coefficient Cn. So I just rewrote an equation which is completely equivalent to the initial Schrödinger equation. And then I can, looking at this equation, I can see that actually there are, so I can look at this equation and look at what happens if I consider the term with n equals 0, which was the one where I had filled my initial state. And I may try to look at a solution where I assume that k dot is small, so that all these terms can be will be small in some sense. So all the CMs should be small at initial time if they don't correspond to the initial state. So I may look at what happens to this equation if I look only at one contribution of the last term, which corresponds to the term which corresponds here in this sum to m equals 0. So that's an approximation, and I will check later if this approximation is valid in some sense or not. But by taking this approximation, what I am retaining in this expansion is only this term. And what I can notice is actually so I want to find what is the solution of this term. And what I can notice is actually that this factor is a pure imaginary. So this I can demonstrate by looking at this normalization condition, which was there, applied to n equal m equals 0. As my wave function is normalized and depends on the parameter k, if I take the derivative of this quantity, it should be 0, because this is 1, so the derivative should be, the derivative of the constant is 0. But now I can apply the derivative on the two factors that constitute this scalar product, and it will give a term like this, plus a term like this. And by definition of the scalar product, it means that I can rewrite this identity like this. So I see that it means that the real part of this object is 0, which means that u0k du0k equal I time the imaginary part of u0k du0k. So this object is a pure imaginary object. And now I can put so this is a pure imaginary object multiplied by I, and I can integrate right away this equation taking into account the initial condition in this form. It will be the exponential of two terms. The first one is associated with the energy, and I forgot this label, which was the time-dependent part. So, in general, it's not a constant. It depends on the time through the time dependence of that parameter. That would be the first term, and the second term is associated with this part, and it will take it will take this form. So I just replace this quantity by this quantity here, and I guess, yeah, with I, which appears here. So I see that the evolution of this coefficient actually, it keeps its modulus constant in this approximation, but phase factors were added to this quantity. So there is one phase factor which looks like what we are expecting from usual quantum mechanics, and it's the one that Yuli Nazarov was telling people called it dynamical phase. And this one, actually, we may make a change of variable, and we find that it actually does not depend on the velocity, but it depends only on the path that was defined by the variation of this parameter k, because we can write it as so that would be the geometrical phase. And this would be the dynamical phase, the dynamical phase, while the geometrical phase could be written as dk along some contour of this quantity. So all the time dependence in this expression was actually absorbed into only the definition of the contour in K space that was followed during that evolution. And we see that there is no explicit time dependence in this path. So that was the observation of Berry that we get this factor. I want just, before commenting more on this factor, I want just now to come back to this approximation that I was making to neglect the coefficient Cm with m different from 0. So to do this, what I have to do is to estimate how much these coefficients were generated in the course of the evolution. So now I can go back to this equation, but taking the fact that the terms with n different from 0 are essentially forced only by the contribution from this term m equals 0 in this sum. And by looking at the approximate solution for these terms with n different from 0, what I will find is that taking into account that the time dependence is very small, actually the only effect is that the coefficient C0 here oscillates fast because of this dynamical phase, but all the rest can be taken as almost constant. So the terms Cn equals 0 will be essentially given by this quantity divided by the difference in the energies between the band n equals 0 and the band that I am considering in this equation. Times the coefficient C0 that for this evolution, including its phase dependence. So these are the result of this calculation, which is called adiabatic because the time dependence of the control parameter k is taken to be very, very slow. And what we find is actually that it was legitimate to consider that all the coefficients in the other bands were remaining small, providing that we can identify a small parameter in this equation. And identifying a small parameter starts with telling that the velocity of variation of this parameter is small. So this is fine, but we have to say small compared with what. And we see in this equation that the smallness is actually to tell that the smallness of variation of this parameter has to be compared with the energy difference between levels. So this adiabatic expansion requires to have large gaps between the different bands. And this is this largeness which tells whether the adiabatics is whether the motion is adiabatic or not. So For instance, we know that there can be non-adiabatic transitions, and this non-adiabatic transition will be all the more important if the velocity is larger and larger compared with the scale of typical gaps in the system. So, taken this, we will say that this is a small correction, and I'm just going to discuss first this first effect, which is this appearance of what is called now a geometrical phase on top of this dynamical phase. Yes?
Something that I cannot connect to original particle theory is that, or let's say Hamiltonian is changed in a 3D parameter space, and we just calculated the solid angle from the point of degeneracy. But here our K is also a vector 3D space.
Here I did it for a scalar in a 1D system, but you may, so here I'm following one path, but you could generalize these ideas with a variation of the control parameters, with K being a vector if you wish.
Yes, but here it also, it works. So because we also have the concept of a contour, but I can't see how in 1D we can have a contour around the point of degeneracy. So fully connected.
I guess I will come to it. I want to do it first in a simple example, and then I will tell how this, maybe the ideas that you have in mind appear. But here I'm just taking this simple example where I have one scalar parameter that varies with time, and I want to go as far as I can to tell which kind of consequences we can expect from it.
You just need to draw over K and it will be for 3D.
Hmm?
You just need to draw over K and it will be for 3D.
I can do this, but what are the physical consequences of it? For the moment, I want to take with 1D. But yeah, in this derivation, nothing prevents me to take K as a vector, just at the level of the derivation.
But here it still holds that we have a
Yes.
phase in
The very phase that I get here is for this contour along a line. So what? So I have this geometrical phase, and in principle, it's this geometrical phase. So I did all this calculation for a given gauge, and I could possibly have chosen a different gauge by adding the phase factor to all these wave functions. And you may check rapidly, and we'll go back to it, that actually if I change the gauge, actually I will change the definition of this geometrical phase. So as it is not an object which is gauge independent, it is not a physical object in principle, and I may even imagine to gauge it out in principle, except if now I am considering a closed path in my space of parameter. And then that's actually what is called the Berry phase. It is, so it is this quantity which when I consider now its behavior, in a closed space of parameter, then maybe this object may have some physical consequences because I'm considering a closed loop. Yes?
So why does the first contour have physical consequences?
So I will come. That's precisely what I want to do. So what I will define here is actually, I will define what people call the Berry connection. So yeah, for the moment it's a question mark whether there is any relevance for this object, and I want to expand more on it. So the Berry connection is actually what is this Berry phase is made of. It's A and K for a given band N now, which is and now I want to see what happens when I change the gauge. So let's say that instead of my gauge, initial gauge, I replace it with U prime n k equal exponential I phi k times U n k. So because of the presence of this phase factor for the changer gauge, I will find that my Berry connection is modified. It will be equal to the initial Berry connection minus a term which comes from this phase factor, which is d phi k over dk. And if I plug this formula into the Berry phase, I will find that gamma prime equal gamma plus the variation of this phase factor along the contour. So it will be equal phi of k initial minus phi of k at the initial value of my contour, so 2k at the final value of my contour with minus sign here. And then I can argue that because I have a closed contour, the parameter at the initial and the final value of the contour will produce the same Hamiltonian. So I should find the same physical wave functions, which means that this phase factor has to be identical for these two different values of k initial and final. So, well, the same value of k initial and k final in a contour space, but I have to reproduce the same wave function. But it is a phase factor. So the way that I can reproduce the same wave function is actually to have phi, which has made the loop. It may return to its value, or it may differ by 2 pi. And that was so this quantity actually could be different from 0, but it has to be a multiple of 2 pi. And that's maybe a confusion in terminology that I used yesterday. So this is called, it is associated with single valuedness of the wave function. And yesterday I used the concept of reality, which I used because I read it in reality in literature. It's not real. It's not the fact that the wave function is real, but it's a reality principle that the wave function describes something physical. Okay, so better use single valuedness than this word reality that I was using yesterday because of the confusion with real versus complex. So I see that my Berry phase is actually not gauge invariant, but is defined modulo 2 pi. But still, I can define a quantity which is gauge invariant, and based on these ingredients that appear in the Berry phase, it's actually starting from the Berry connection. I can define what is called the Berry curvature. And this I can define, and probably it will start being related with your question. So this Berry connection, which was defined here for this one-dimensional variation of parameter, actually I can extend it for parameters of parameters in an arbitrary space. And in particular, in a three-dimensional parameter space, my Berry curvature would be defined as the rotational in momentum space of my Berry curvature. So now I have come to a 3D space of parameters. So here typically a 3D solids, because I am speaking of block bands. And I can define the rotational in momentum space of this Berry curvature. And because we have this additional derivative, now if we look at what happens when we make a change of gauge, we will find that this object is gauge invariant. So taking into account this formula, we may say that, well, the formulas are closely looking to what we know from electromagnetism. That is, this looks like a magnetic field in this momentum space. A magnetic field. While so that would be for the Berry curvature, while the Berry connection looks like a vector potential in momentum space. And as in electromagnetism, the vector potential can be, we can change the gauge of the vector potential, but it will still describe the same magnetic field. So, okay, I was initially doing only 1D. I said that the calculation can be done in 3D, and we will reproduce this kind of formula. This it's easy to do in 2D. We just need to project, because we had variations only on kx and ky plane, for instance. It means that we are only interested in the z component of this object. So 2D and 3D for this band is okay, is okay. But what I was using here was I was isolating a single band out of all the others that was separated by gaps. And there are more complicated constructions that take into account an arbitrary number of dimensions, like 4D or 5D, and also bands that are degenerate that I won't enter into it. So I will stick to this simplest version of the Berry curvature. So I want now to comment on what is the role of symmetries on these objects. So I can think first of inversion. If I have inversion, it means that my wave function should be independent if I change k to minus k. And then just by looking at this formula, at the formula for the Berry connection, because of the appearance of this derivative, it will mean that my Berry connection for k should be the opposite to the one for minus k. While for the Berry curvature, I will get that fk equal f minus k. Now, if I have time reversal symmetry, and I guess I made some mistake, there was the concept that k should be reversed to minus k, but also I should take the square of the wave function. So essentially, it's unk should be identical to un minus k, while here it's unk, which should be identical to u star n minus k. And because of the complex conjugation, actually what I get is that the Berry connection stays identical, while the Berry curvature takes an opposite sign. So by combining this, by assuming that the system has both inversion and time reversal symmetry, then I will find that necessarily the Berry curvature has to vanish. Because f should be equal to f and to f minus k and to minus f minus k, so the only possibility that it is 0. And if I have time reversal symmetry only, then I can still have some properties. So if I integrate this object over a space of parameters k, which is contains positive and minus and negative states, like for instance in a two-dimensional Brillouin zone, I would find that this object is necessarily 0 because it contains both positive and negative contributions. So we see that when there are symmetries, there are some constraints on the values that either the object or its integration over some space can take. So I want to see that there is one observable actually where this Berry curvature object appears in a physical observable. So here I was just I don't know which title I gave to it. I want to discuss the anomalous velocity. And actually, this will be important for the discussion of topological properties, but it was actually derived in the 50s, so it's not really recent. It was derived in the context of understanding Hall effects, not quantized Hall effects yet, but I will find that there is a relation with it. So it was derived by these people in Karplus and Lüttinger in 1954, so much before even the quantum Hall effect existed. But I want to, and it was useful even at that time, to describe Hall effects, and I want to make a connection then with the integer quantum Hall effect as I presented to you. So let me show how it works. So what I want to describe is a material. Let's say, for instance, this two-dimensional electron gas that I was discussing when I was introducing the quantum Hall effect. And I want to see how it responds to an electric field. So I have an electric field in my system, and I want to see how electrons respond to it. But I want to keep this frame of the block bands. It was convenient to have a lattice, so I want to describe quantum mechanically the electric field, so I should introduce it into the Hamiltonian, and I have a variety of gauges that I can think of to introduce this electric field into my Schrödinger equation. But as I want to use the block theorem, I still want to use this notion of periodicity of the lattice. So the convenient gauge to introduce the electric field without modifying the periodicity of my lattice is to introduce as a vector potential using this formula. So it means now that if I look at what's the effect in the Hamiltonian, sorry, this one which I was describing for the Berry faces, it will contain this term plus the vector potential which I have to introduce in my Hamiltonian, which will appear like this. And here you have to think of P, K, E, and X as vector variables. So I have exactly the same form of Hamiltonian that I was describing to describe the block bands, including the fact that now I can introduce a time-dependent parameter. And if the electric field is small in some sense, I can use the adiabatic theory that I was using so far by replacing, by calling all this quantity as k of t, with k dot small, provided that the electric field is small enough. So I already wrote what was what were the adiabatic solutions for the wave functions. So if I collect this leading order term and this contribution into how a wave function in a given band evolves, I can write that up to first order. So I call here to signify that it's up to first order, where k is the t-dependent parameter. It is essentially given by the wave function of one band which I was considering. So here, okay, I put in this index m here. So that m, in this calculation, I took m equals 0, but I could generate to arbitrary m if I wish. For each of the bands, I can apply adiabatic theory. But my wave function in a given state is essentially the one given by the time-independent theory, plus a correction, which is given by this term, and which for this Hamiltonian, where the parametric dependence is given by the electric field, can be written that way. Yes?
The first part is the one we would have with no electric field?
Yes.
Okay, but why is it?
Okay, so if maybe it's, let me just change my mind with what I called here M and N. So I said if there was no electric field, and I am looking at this band 0, which I was isolating before. So my wave function is essentially given by C0, which has a phase factor, which I collect into this wave function. So that's my leading order contribution.
But it's still time dependent?
Yes, it is time dependent. Oh, okay, I erased, but I use this expansion. It is time dependent by the fact that I'm using the instantaneous eigenbasis. It's a basis which is valid at any value, at any fixed value of k. So, okay, you have a system with levels that vary with time. At each instant of time, I can identify one state and all other states which are separated by gaps. So these gaps, I want them to remain in the evolution. But my Hamiltonian depends on time, so there is no reason why so I am still in the band which I labeled with n equal 0, m equals 0, m equal 1. I remain in this band, but there is no reason why the explicit expression for the wave function in a constant reference frame is the same here and there. I know it's still, in this picture, it's still the ground state, but the wave function associated with the ground state has no reason to write the same way here and there. And that's the time dependence which I keep.
But it's moving over time because we are adding some population, which is here. Well,
Here it's the electric field.
okay, because
It's because of the electric field, yes. And so that's this term. But we see that in the course of this evolution, we can, the fact that the wave function at this time, and the wave function, so this is at t, and this is at t plus delta t, plus some dt, because of this argument that this wave function is not the same as this one, if I write them in a constant reference frame, it means that we can expand this wave function into this one and all the other states. Because there are some overlaps between the wave function at t plus dt in the ground state, and, well, the main overlap is with the wave function at t in the same ground state, but it has also overlap with all the other wave functions. And that's essentially what this formula and this formula capture. Well, this formula corresponds to the second term in this formula. So here I would have put 0, and sticking to this notation, I would have put E0, En, and E0 here. E0 here. And, well, if I don't want to make too much mistake, I want to say that this formula works actually for any level 0 or... I don't have any reason to distinguish level 0 compared to the other one. So I can put... It's just a game of changing indices, but it's exactly the same it's the same content as this one. Okay, so it's just to generalize to the formula to any band and not just the band n equals 0. Yes? Here, yes, I use the continuous. Yes.
how would you calculate this temperature liquid? For example, one has Hamiltonian routine because we have calculated vegan states and output states.
Yes, there are clever. There are clever ways which are implemented numerically, because even numerically at each k, there is no reason that there is a relation between the gauge at k and k plus delta k where you are calculating. So essentially, you are playing with numerically, I think you are playing with formulas that are related with the Berry curvature. The fact that maybe each element that you want to sum in your calculation is ill-defined modulo 2 pi, but when you sum all of them, you will generate an object which is gauge independent. So there are, well, I didn't prepare enough to tell you how to do it. I know it is done. It is implemented numerically, and it's not a complicated calculation for simple bands like this to calculate numerically the Berry curvature without to have to build. You don't need to build a smooth gauge to do it numerically, because it would be hard task. I can try and think a bit more how to tell you how it works. I just don't recall. So we have this expansion of the wave function, and now we want to calculate how electrons react to the application of this electric field. So what we are interested in is essentially the current, and the current is related with the velocity. And to calculate the velocity of the electrons in a given direction, so I will add an index. Now I need to add an index alpha to specify direction in real space, let's say xy, or z here. So this quantity will be related with the expectation value for the momentum operator. So it's the contribution to the velocity of the electrons at a given instant of time, so this k dependent. And so it will be related with the expectation value of what determines the velocity, which is the momentum operator, with the real wave function of my system. Taking into account, I want to take into account corrections up to the first order in the electric field. And we know that this periodic part of the wave functions was related with psi up to this factor describing plane waves. So if we use the relation between psi, k, and uk, and plug into this definition of what should be the expectation value for the velocity, we will see that we will recover this same formula up to a shift of the momentum because of this plane wave factor. And now we can use this expansion and plug it into this formula to calculate which terms contribute to this velocity. So I plug this formula into this term. And I can add something more, which will be helpful to derive the result, is that if I start with this Hamiltonian, I find actually that this quantity is related with the first derivative of my effective Hamiltonian for the periodic part of the wave function with the momentum. With the momentum, or this quasi-momentum. Okay? So I want now just to plug this object into this equation and collect the terms up to first order in the electric field. So I will get the first order is easy. It's u n k dHTLK over dk u n k. This is the first order. And for the second order, I see that I have two cross terms which will come from the this first order correction appearing in either the right wave function or the left wave function. And if I collect them, I will get one contribution which comes from, which will have this Berry connection that comes out as a scalar product with E. So that's the term which is E beta times this quantity. And the other one is the expectation value of this operator taken on two different states. And then the second term, which I don't write, is the one which comes from the two sides where I apply my first order correction to the wave function. And now I can find actually that I can use a similar identity to the one I was telling you on a given state. So, which in order to derive to show that the Berry connection was purely was real, I used that this object was a constant. So if I took the derivative, so this identity I showed you on the board later, by taking the derivative with the parameter k of this object, I was able to show that the Berry connection was a real object. And the Berry connection was an imaginary object, so that the Berry phase was real. Now I can do the same for a different quantity. Which is this one, but I take the Hamiltonian. And if n and m are different, this quantity should be 0. And now I can also take the derivative with the parameter. And I will find that un dk h tilde um, that will be one term, but there will be also two other ones. And the two other ones correspond to taking the derivative of un or um. But still we have h which applies on one of these eigenvectors, and I will find that I can collect terms which are of this form. So on the end, what I find is that the term which appears here can be collected with this denominator, which is the same that appears here. So to make a contribution which is similar to this Berry connection appear on the numerator between two different states. So it's not the same state. So if I collect all these terms, what I will find is actually this leading order, which corresponds to the group velocity I would have if I was not invoking this adiabatic correction to the velocity. So this is the, essentially, actually, I can find that this quantity is the same as the derivative of the energy in a band with respect to this parameter. And by using this formula and playing with the fact that I can use then a closure formula for all the wave functions, actually, after a little algebra, I can find that this term can be collected with the Berry curvature for the state in a given k. So let me maybe put back vectors. So I have this complicated formula, but I can use this identity to eliminate the denominator and this object, and I will find here that I can collect terms which are are of the form, so u nk dk um times dk un with the sum over m. But this term I can also say it's equal to its conjugate, so it's the same as un dk un. Now I can use the closure formula because of the presence of the formulation of all the m's, and I see that the contribution which was there only depends on the state in the band n which I was considering, and the formula which appears is actually the same as the Berry curvature. So I have this formula, which is the formula that was derived by Karplus and Luttinger, which tells that for electrons in a block band, in the presence of an applied electric field within the adiabatic theory, so assuming that the electric field is small, the velocity carried by a band consists of the usual group velocity, which we are used to, plus a term which is related with the electric field, as well as the Berry curvature of the band that I'm considering. Yes?
You are now working in a fixed gauge. I think when you write electric field E,
Yes.
the derivative of, as a time derivative of
The vector potential, yes?
potential, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have time-dependent scale, which make you be able to use the formula in the box to get the anomalous velocity.
Yes.
But now if I use different gauge, I mean instead I write E, electric field, as a gradient of some scalar potential.
I could do this, and I should, in principle, recover the same result. The problem is that because I introduce the potential will, well, for a uniform electric field, the potential will vary linearly with space. And because of this linear dependence, I cannot use the Bloch theorem anymore. Because my lattice is, I add a contribution to the potential which breaks the periodicity. So I am using a specific gauge where I know I can use the Bloch theorem. If I change the gauge, I won't be able to derive this formula within the Bloch formalism. At least I don't know how to do. So here it's a gauge-specific derivation, but we know that physics should be gauge invariant, so it means that this formula should hold for any gauge on the end. But yes, indeed, I was gauge specifics here. Yes?
Can you maybe repeat more on which scale electric field needs to be small in order for the adiabatic approximation to hold?
So So you want to compare a scale fixed by the electric field to gaps in between the different bands that would come to this calculation. Yes?
In the first line on the right part of the board, U beta, is it supposed to be a sum over beta?
Yes. It's sum over beta. Yes, so this beta, which it's sum over beta indeed, and it was appearing because of, yes, here I think I can get it. When I was doing this derivation, I was taking a one-dimensional parameter, but nothing forbids me to extend the space to parameter that has several components. And it would appear as a scalar product here and between this quantity and this quantity. And it's exactly the same that appears here. Yes?
How do you enrich your brackets in order to have the closure relation?
So this one I didn't write down. I can say that this is 0 for n different from m. Take the derivative, as I was doing for the state with same n and m. The derivative will be 0, and this will show that I can permute with reversing a sign.
So there is a minus sign for the...
Yes, yes. Yeah, between this and this, I forgot the minus sign. And then there is a last thing maybe that I didn't. So in this summation, I didn't. I was specifying that the sum should exclude one of the states, but you can get convinced that this contribution, the contribution with m equal n is 0, so you can add it for free, and then you have really the closure relation. So, okay, I derive this anomalous velocity. And now I want to tell what's the current that flows in my, let's say if I specify in a two-dimensional electron gas. So the current that flows, for instance, in the x direction will be related with the current, a summation over all state, and an integral over the two-dimensional Brillouin zone of my velocity in a given band and for a given k along x. And I plug this formula. And sorry, I should also add the Fermi function. And I see that by combining this, I will get, well, I put the velocity. And probably I forgot also 2 pi square. I see that the only way to get a contribution to the current along x is to apply an electric field along y times this Berry curvature, which in the 2D case was along z. And now, so we have this first term, which was calculated in the absence of electric field. So it should be an equilibrium current, which should be 0. There shouldn't be any flow without applying an electric field. So this term has to be 0 in equilibrium, has to be 0 by definition of equilibrium. And I am left with a term which depends on the electric field and which gives a transverse response. So it will lead to a quantized, it will lead to a transverse conductivity, which can be put in the form E square over 2 pi, sum over n bands, d2k. Now, so I put 1 2 pi here and the other one here, f n k z, and time this function. And what I want to say, so what I want to consider is what happens in a case where I have many bands that are separated by gaps, and I assume that my chemical potential is within gaps, within a gap, so that all states below the gaps are occupied, and all states above the gap are empty. So it's the case where the Fermi function will be either 0 or 1, so that I can express the transverse conductivity as a sum of this object over all field bands. And here, well, you have seen several times that sometimes we put or forget to put a h bar. So, and we recover a formula, which is h bar over square times some quantity which I call nu for the moment, and I will show very rapidly that this nu is actually an integer. So I didn't prove it yet, but we get something which is similarly looking at the quantum Hall effect, provided that I demonstrate to you that nu is an integer. That is a transverse conductance which is quantized in units of E square over h. So I just make a few comments, and I will end the session, the lecture today, by showing you why nu is an integer. So it's similarly looking to integer quantum Hall effect, but it's I didn't really I don't claim this is integer quantum Hall effect in the same way I was telling you last lecture, because as soon as we apply a magnetic field, we break also this lattice symmetry that I was using to derive the Bloch theorem. Actually, you can introduce a new symmetry associated with the presence of the magnetic field, which is by magnetic translation, which can be done. And actually, it was done in the 80s, rapidly after the discovery of the quantum Hall effect, to demonstrate why the quantum Hall effect has something related with topology. So this line of argument is still the same as the one that was used to claim that integer quantum Hall effect could be understood in the sense of some topology of the bands in a solid, but in the presence of a quantizing magnetic field. So here I don't have quantizing magnetic field when I do this. Another thing is that here I used this formalism of Bloch band. There were derivations of this Hall conductivity that are more general than just by Bloch band theory, which can express this quantity in terms of Green functions, which is a way to claim that this result is actually robust to weak disorder and weak interaction, which I cannot show here. Here, really, I have a perfect lattice to derive this formula, but there are ways to derive this formula in a case where interactions and weak disorder are present in the system. And still, we would recover an object which has the same expression of it. So in that sense, this prediction of a possibility for a quantized Hall conductance is not restricted to this pure periodic lattice that I was telling you, that I was describing to you. Next, I have also some results which I can express. So I know that if I have, for instance, time reversal symmetry, I was telling you that this object has to be 0. So we need to have a broken time reversal symmetry to expect here a quantity which is non-zero, and that's indeed what happens in the quantum Hall effect, where we need to apply the magnetic field that breaks translations, that breaks time reversal symmetry. But we can imagine models where time reversal symmetry is broken in a different way than by these Landau levels, and this I will tell you in 2 days. So let me now give a sketch why this quantity is actually quantized with nu being an integer. So this has to do with this question that was mentioned about, for instance, in the numerics, or even whether the gauge has to be continuous or not. It's related with the fact that I require the wave functions to correspond to this reality criterion that I was using. So I have different values, different ways to check it. So if I look at, so I have wave functions which I defined in my first Brillouin zone. And my first Brillouin zone is actually, so let's say fkx, ky. In the simplest case, I can take this square Brillouin zone, which look like this. But actually, I have to identify, so it's not like this, with 2 pi. This line and this line actually correspond to the same state. So actually, I have to identify this line with this line. That's for one direction, and I have to identify this line and this line because they also correspond to the same state. So if I look at what's the topology of my Brillouin zone by making this connection, actually, it looks like a torus. So here, a 2-dimensional torus for this 2-dimensional electron gas. So if I look at this quantity. It has to be integrated actually over a torus. And the torus is a closed surface which does not have boundaries. So I may be tempted to use theorems that we use in electromagnetism. We can use, so we know that F is like a magnetic field, so like the rotational of some potential vector, and that was the terminology I was using to compare magnetic field and vector potential in real space with Berry connection and Berry curvature. And if I use the Stokes theorem, we may expect that because there is no boundaries for this integration, the Stokes theorem would tell you that it is 0. And actually, it is not. It is not necessarily 0. And the reason is related with whether we are able to choose a smooth gauge over the whole Brillouin zone or not in for the wave functions. And actually, it is not necessary. It is not always possible to choose a gauge which is uniform over the whole Brillouin zone, so that I can gauge it out and apply the Stokes theorem. So how can I think of it? I may imagine that I did the derivation of the Bloch theorem for my two-dimensional solids in this case, and I was able to find my wave functions and their part which is periodic with the lattice. And now it happens that I am able to find one gauge which is smooth over one part of the Brillouin zone, but I add as a singularity somewhere here. And I find a gauge, let's say, I find a gauge that is okay over the whole Brillouin zone, and such that I have single valueness of the wave function along the boundaries of my Brillouin zone, but still it has a singularity. So I will imagine that there is a line where I want to use this gauge such that the wave function is periodic over the whole portion of the Brillouin zone, which will be this one. And here I want to find another gauge which is smooth over that part. So it means that I can find a gauge U1 which is smooth in this region S1 of the Brillouin zone, but it has a singularity somewhere else. And I can find a different gauge which is smooth in another part of the Brillouin zone, but that's the singularity there. So it's possible to decompose the whole Brillouin zone into patches where I can define the locally continuous gauge, but it will sometime it will be okay for the whole Brillouin zone, but sometime it will fail in other parts of the Brillouin zone. But I can imagine that I can patch such that I have such that within one patch the wave function is well defined, smooth, and continuous. So let's assume that such a patch exists. Then, well, these two patches with wave functions U1 and U2 should match along this frontier in the Brillouin zone, which means that I should have U1, which is exponential to U2 along this contour, because they should describe the same object. So they should be, the wave function should be identical up to a face. And now I want to calculate this object. So this object is gauge invariant. So that's I demonstrated. So we can decompose it into two contribution over the two patches using the wave functions that were smooth within one patch and the other one. And then for each of them, we can apply the Stokes theorem. because now the wave function is well defined and smooth along the whole contour, but now the contour has some boundaries. And actually, so this, let me write it here. The Stokes theorem tells that I can express as a contour integral of the Berry connection for the first patch. Plus the contour theorem for the second patch. And now, so when I do the contour theorem, I have my orientation of my contour, which is like this. So I see that I am taking into account this integral along that part of the contour, actually, with opposite signs. Sorry, so that was for the contour 2. For opposite signs for the contour 1 versus the contour 2, which means that actually what I am considering is the difference of the contribution of the two terms. Over a closed contour now. That is essentially C2 equal minus C1. And because it is the difference of two Berry connections, this I showed that it was related. So this quantity I showed was related with the integral of this part of that was expressing the differences gauge along the two contours, which means that this quantity is a multiple of 2 pi. That's what I showed when I was discussing the gauge invariance of the Berry face along a closed contour. It's exactly the same argument. And then that's precisely the demonstration that now if I divide this quantity by 2 pi, I showed that this object is actually can be an integer. That's precisely what I calculated. I found that if there are singularities which prevent me from defining a smooth gauge for the block wave function over the whole Brillouin zones, then I will possibly generate Chern numbers that are non-zero integer. So the appearance of an integer here, which is non-zero, is related with what is called an obstruction to define the smooth gauge for the wave functions of these block bands over the whole Brillouin zone. So that's the demonstration that this object is an integer, and actually this is the Chern invariant for this class of two-dimensional systems that have a quantized Hall conductance. It is called the Chern number, and actually there are different Chern numbers. This is the first Chern number. So it's the first demonstration that within the block theory of solids, we can generate topological invariants that are quantized. Here, this invariant is called the first Chern number, and it's related with the fact that I have a two-dimensional system with broken time reversal symmetry. So actually, it's not the only invariant that appears. There are other invariants, both integer and different from arbitrary integers, in the sense that there are invariants that just determine a sign. They can be plus or minus, or 0 or 1. So that's all what I'm able to tell for today. So I showed you a derivation starting from the block bands and the application, the effect of an electric field in this block band to derive the possibility for quantized conductance with this wave of block bands of solids. And what I will do in the last lecture will be to show actual models where I show how nu can really be non-zero within a model of bands in a periodic lattice. Yes?
Can you give an example of singularity of the wave function?
Yes, I will. I will also. I will discuss. I will construct, I guess that will, well, I will construct a model of what is called the Chern insulator, which is in the same class as the quantum Hall effect, but within a description of electrons in a lattice. So it will be a model of spinless electron in a lattice that propagate in the lattice with broken time reversal symmetry, which will be essentially enforced by the fact that I consider only one spin of the electrons. And I will construct wave functions and identify where the singularity is in the definition of the wave function.